So welcome. This is going to be a fun and interesting workshop. I have to say, I felt like I bit off a little more than I could chew once I started diving into the actual mechanics of what it means to practice, because if you come away with one thing today, I want it to be that we think of practicing as something other than forcing yourself to sit down and playing stuff over and over again. That's like the old model. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to play this thing over and over again until I get it. And usually that leaves a whole lot of bad experiences, and we don't want those. So hopefully you all have your workshop outline printed out, handy to take notes on. If not, have a notepad handy to take notes on. You'll want to take a lot of notes today, because this is some stuff that will help you regardless of any instrument. And I'm actually kind of relieved I get to just have one instrument on this class. Usually I'm jumping around from 4 different instruments during the workshop. Since this is more of a mental subject, just be aware that just because I have a banjo on, I also do play musical instruments. I do both. So this is just symbolic so I can demonstrate stuff. Let's hop right over to the business. Let's take a look at the chart called the Trinity of Practice. I'm just going to briefly discuss that. That's kind of the premise of this class today, is that everything is in 3 categories once we start studying the art of practice. What's ironic is the mind area of practice is actually the largest area. And that's what I was finding out as I researched this subject. Environmental is important, physical is important, but generally the majority of today's workshop is going to be focused on how to get our mind in the right spot. So the idea of the 3 categories being physical, environmental, and mental, and in some of our cases, mental, italics, is a very good way to think of it, because now we can basically make sure we have all those 3 zones. So looking at your outline, we're going to start with environmental. And the first thing, and we all know about this, is if your instrument isn't set up correctly, no matter how much you practice, you're still going to have a frustrating experience, because you need to be able to be focusing on your technique, not wrestling with an instrument. So, for example, my first banjo was strung up with fishing line and had the freaking action was like half an inch above the fingerboard. And for months and months, I thought the problem was me until someone showed me that it was the banjo. That's actually all detailed in my book, Banjos in Babylon. The story of how I had my first banjo lesson when my dad's school bus got pulled over by a trooper, and he happened to play banjo because we were in Tennessee. Long story, it's in the book. But if you need to check a couple of basic categories on your instrument, here's what they are. Action. All instruments, no matter if it's ukulele, violin, anything with strings, you basically want your strings to be so you can hardly fit a nickel between the string and the fret around past the 12th fret. You should have it as low as you can without buzzing. That's going to make sure that we're focusing on proper fingering and technique and not squeezing really hard just to make a clear note, okay? The other thing about instrument setup is if you have a really crappy instrument, there's only so much you can do with that. And most of you probably have decent axes. If you don't, talk to me at our next lesson. I can give you some pointers so you don't get something that's all shiny but not real. So I'm going to have a couple of assumptions today before we move ahead. And one is that you have a decently set up instrument. If you don't, make sure we discuss that. The other is to make sure that, and this is an item B under 2, having what I call your jam zone. There's certain elements that we need when we're practicing with a computer. First of all, as you know, I'm a big fan of having headphones with one slightly off so you can hear the tracks you're playing to as well as yourself. Having a good microphone makes my experience better, but that's not critical. Music stand and comfy armless chair. This is huge. I'm a huge fan of making sure that you don't put your instrument in a case. I like to say cases are coffins. Therefore, when you're not playing for a while or you're taking it somewhere, put it in the case. Otherwise, it will literally have another barrier between you and sitting down to practice. Super duper important. So now moving on to item 2 under B, the environment, loud audio. As all of you know, if you're not playing with other humans, which we will be soon, knock on wood, we have to play with recorded tracks. And if we can't hear it really loud, it's going to be difficult to match the timing. Very, very important that we have that beat and that timing we're playing to. Then I talk about item 3 under environment, which is a comfy, armless chair. Yes, I've been guilty of laying down in the lazy boy or on my couch with watching Netflix with the sound off, practicing. That's fine now and then when you're just sitting noodling around. But any serious practice session, we want to make sure that we're sitting on something without arms that allows us to be straight. And we'll talk about posture in a minute. Then I talk about having a music stand with your binder printouts. Most of you are really good at that, making sure that we have stuff printed out so we can take notes on it. So when you and I have your Zoom lessons, if I say, hey, this note here needs to be moved, you can actually put it on the paper itself. So I'm a huge fan of having stuff printed out. Then we have item 5, instrument stand or wall hanger. Man, every room in my house has instruments hanging from the walls. I love wall hangers because you can walk by, do a double take, yank it off the wall, start playing. Instrument stands are fine too if you don't have a large dog, because that will knock it over, or small children. So just want to be quick. I'm going to cover some basics here that most of you, if you're my student, you know about, because I'm always yelling at you about this. But it's good to cover the basics in case you're a newbie here. Now let's look at item C under 2. Having a tangible and visible practice plan. Now for most of you who are my students, this is your Jamalong practice room. When you log in there, you see exactly what we're supposed to be working on. There's no gray area. But so many people that don't have that, they'll sit down with their instrument and do a lot of wandering around, which is okay at times. But it's not going to give you the same amount of progress as having a tangible practice plan that you're looking at numbered items on what we're intending to practice. I'm a big fan of having a practice journal. I have a couple of them. I'll write down like how it went today and, if I failed something or didn't, so I can discuss it with my instructor, which, by the way, I do take lessons as well. And I'll whine and complain to him about what happened at my last practice session because I can consult my practice journal. Super duper important. Okay. I'm a big fan of whiteboards. I wish I could angle the camera around my studio. You'd see, it looks like that scene in A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, where he has all these scribbles all over the place. Big fan of you get an idea, go write it down so you can see it next time you sit down. Okay, that was my lightning rapid fire intro talking about the environment. You have to have a place to be able to sit and not be too bothered. And this also brings up, the people that we'll discuss later in your life that you want them on your side, okay? Sometimes it's not so pretty. I remember experience I had neighbors decided to teach the whole family violin at the same time. We're talking like 4 people learning violin. And I had a paper-thin wall at the time. And I tried to hang in there, but at some point I literally had to make a call to report domestic violins. It was just not acceptable after a while. So now, item 3, we're going to talk about science of the body. How we make sure that our body is serving us when we're playing our instrument. The first thing is posture. By the way, I have a blog on jamalong.org. If you go to the blog link and scroll down, there's something called The Science of Musical Posture. You may want to read that. That'll go into more detail about what I'm going to cover today. Okay? That's on the blog page. But the first thing is the good chair or stool. And I find that if you have something that swivels, it's actually way better because when you're playing in a real life situation, if you're standing, you're going to be turning to face who you're taking the lead from or giving it to. If you're sitting, it's a really good ability to be able to swivel while you play. I'm a big fan of having something that turns, and that's why I like a stool over a chair. Now, wearing your instrument properly. There's a lot of stuff written about this. Ironically, I'm holding a banjo. Let me grab a guitar. Most of you who play guitar know that there's 2 approaches. You can do the folk approach or Western approach where you have it on your right thigh. You can do the classical approach on your left thigh, side saddle. So you have these 2 options because we've got this nice dent here. Now, smaller instruments like the ukulele, the violin, and the mandolin, we generally compress it against our body with the aid of a strap. The banjo is the anomaly here because it's round. As you know, it's a bongo on a stick. So generally, I'm a fan of having it between your thighs, aiming at a 45. I've seen people play it here, and I've even seen people do this, and they're always wrestling with it. They're literally wrestling with it. We want to have it so ideal if you let go, because I have it balanced back in between my legs, I am able to not hold it up with my hands. Sometimes a strap can help with that because your hands want to be focusing on making clear notes. So whether it's a guitar, ukulele, banjo, mandolin, whatever, make sure that it's solidly in your lap so it stays on its own, whether it's because of the way you have it on your body or because of the strap that you have attached to it. Every new student I get is basically, if I ask them to remove their hand, their instrument falls over. So you want it to be on its own. That's a big one. Now, strap or not, item 2 under 3. Generally, we use a strap for standing up when we stand up and play. And in real life outdoor jam sessions like festivals or, music camps, we're going to be standing up a lot. So if any of you at this group don't have a strap, I'd recommend trying one out and practice standing up now and then. This is a whole different area of practice. Some of you already do this. If you haven't practiced standing up, I'm going to highly suggest that you try that with a strap, and you'll all of a sudden see it's a whole different animal. You don't have the same view of your fingerboard. It feels a little different, but there'll be scenarios where you won't be able to sit down. There's a famous scene in a Woody Allen movie where he was a cello player in a marching band. Some of you probably remember that scene. And every 2 seconds he had to pick up his chair, run up to catch up with the band, and sit back down again and start playing. So in that circumstance, he should have had a strap. But in most cases, straps are for standing. It even sounds like a slogan. Now, item 4 under 3 of the physical is that we want to be flat-footed or have a foot stand. Think about this. You'll probably notice this now. A lot of you, when you're sitting and practicing, are going to do strange things with your feet. You'll be tiptoeing. You'll have one foot on top of the other foot. You'll have these strange tangles going on where your feet are. If you're doing that, that means you need to invest in a foot stand. It's a small little stand that you put one foot up on to elevate it to make it easier to hold your instrument. Now, if you're not going to do that, then you have to get in the habit of having heels and toes, both feet flat-footed on the floor. Think of it this way. If you had to suddenly stand up, if you're like tiptoeing and balancing one foot on the other heel, you're not going to be able to do that. So think flat-footed, straight back, unless you have a foot stand. I'm a big fan of the foot stand. A lot of classical players do that because they have it on one leg and they need to elevate that leg. $15 online, you can get a foldable foot stand. Now, straight back, relaxed arms. This is item 5 under physical. I can't tell you how many people come to me and they look like they're doing some strange kung fu posture when they're practicing their instrument. They're not relaxed. Basically, if your back is straight, your arms should be like dead weight. Just enough energy to carry your hand around the fingerboard. That's all we want to do with your arms. I'll touch back on that in a minute. With the arms, we have a philosophy developed by classical guitar players called the golden spiral. And this is in mathematics. I actually was a dork and gave you the formula. It's 1.61803398875. Not sure how useful that's going to be, but that's the ratio of the golden mean or the exponential spiral. You'll see pictures of it online where a seashell starts large and then the curve gets smaller and smaller. That ideally should be the same from our shoulder to the tips of our fingers. This spiral is getting tighter and tighter as we wind around. So if you're doing this or doing this, you break that continuum and you actually impede your energy flow, not to sound too Yoda, but I mean actual physical energy where you're able to exert energy firing from your synapses to the tips of your fingers. So I'm a big fan of, like, when I look over here and even look here, whatever instrument it is, violin, cello, whatever, you have that soft curve getting smaller and smaller as it gets to the tips of your digits. That's what that means. If you research the golden spiral sometime online in the Fibonacci sequence, you'll be fascinated how this applies to any time we're trying to send energy through a system to create pressure at the other end. And that's exactly what we're doing when we play our instruments. I find that fascinating. Now, your hands. This is items, I believe, 7. Wrist angles and present thumb. These are classic beginner stuff, but it doesn't hurt to go over this. The angle of the wrist is really interesting. You have 3 positions. You have concave, convex, and straight. Okay? If you watch me play for a second, it depends on the kind of music that I'm playing, which will dictate the angle of my wrist. So if I'm playing everyday stuff, I'll probably keep it sort of straight. Now if I have a stretch, I pushed it out for the stretch. Now I'm coming back into easy stuff. I'll even go to an inward bend sometimes. Okay. So you want to have that active. Your wrist is like a fulcrum for your gears to help you shift your gears. So many people, and especially a lot of teachers, teach you always have to be pushing out, especially classical teachers. Old-timey bluegrass teachers, just be relaxed, hold it like a baseball bat. No, you want to have all three. Some of you who've done classical music with me will notice that when you're playing a stretch, all of a sudden, watch if I'm doing this. So right there, I had to do a 4 fret stretch. I pushed my wrist out, but as soon as I'm done, I come back. This ties into a theory with classical guitar players where if you're not exerting yourself, you need to be relaxing. So it's like micro rests. Anytime you're not pressing or hard or doing a stretch or a slightly difficult chord shape, we're actually relaxing the hand and conserving as much energy as we can. It's not a huge deal for y'all, but if you ever get into performing, or like I remember back when humans did shows and I played a casino, it was a 4-hour show. And I really had to learn how to relax between. Basically, I would let the bass player take a solo and then just like hang onto my banjo, panting, trying to get my energy back. So the trick is the more we can relax, the better during our practice sessions. That's golden words right there. Now, we're looking over at fingering, the last item under 3A, physical. And this is tips and frets, nails, and no double jointing. Back in the day when I taught teenagers, so you'd have sometimes I'd get a girl student, she'd come in with these beautiful long nails, and we'd have to have the talk. You can't have both. Nowadays, of course, with the stressful environments we live in, most of us generally chew our nails short, so that's a moot issue now. But generally with the fingering, it's all about the tips of your fingers, with the exception of your bar. If you're not barring, it's tippy toe, everything we're doing. That's why we have these exercises. We're replacing tips of our fingers right beneath the frets. Now, in this phrase, I say tips and frets because on most of your instruments, even the ukulele with a smaller fret distance, we have a lot of room between the frets. So we want to always be under the business side of the fret, not in the middle, but like right up snug against it where you feel the fret. You're not on top of it, but you can actually feel it. And that's why you can even practice looking away, finding a fret, moving until you bump into it with the tip of your finger. And that's actually a great exercise right there. You can do it like a kung fu style movie and blindfold yourself. And find a fret and then move to be right behind it where you feel yourself bump into it. That's the ideal place to be because you have the most leverage. And if you're playing bass guitar, I have a bass guitar in the other room, or upright bass, you don't have frets, but it's the same idea where you're going to be as close as you can behind the point and then making that tone. Now, item B under physical, don't go in cold. And this is something that I learned a long time ago, and I'm 52 now, and I've been playing since I was 12, and it's really helped me to warm up before I play. In fact, the times I don't, I end up regretting it. So, let's talk about warm-ups. I'm not going to cover all the different moves because you can Google this or go to YouTube and look up hand warm-up or whatever, and they'll show you, all the stretches, basic stretching, both directions. Shake them out. Make sure you actually do some. It looks silly, but it's not as bad as a singer warming up, okay? So the people in your life will not be that frustrated by it. So basically, when you're warming up, spend at least 5 minutes doing that. Not too much time. Some stretching, some shaking. And then we also want to talk about hand warm-up drills. So the right and the left hand have different needs on a musical instrument. Now, when I say right and left, I say that in a non-binary format, meaning if you're left-handed, please interpret in your mind. I'm not being leftist here. So the picking hand and the fretting hand, you might say. So a classic warm-up for all of you to practice on your instruments on the fretting hand is the finger per fret drill. And that all we're going to do is put our hand in a comfortable posture. We're going to press the first fret, first string, second fret, second string, third fret, and then fourth fret, pinky finger, keeping each finger down and then peeling them off one at a time. Same with the second string. And then eventually connecting them. And as I'm doing that, I'm being aware of a nice relaxed arm with a gentle curve. I'm being aware of pressing right under the fret. I'm being aware of not pressing too hard. I'm being aware of all these elements that go into good performance while I'm doing the warm-up. So it has a double duty. It's not just warming up your hand, it's prepping your mind to be in the right zone before we go into our hardcore practice session. Now, the right hand or picking hand or strumming hand or bowing hand is much different because there's so much going on depending on your instrument. Basically, if you're a banjo player, it's rolls. If you're a guitar player, it's pick strums and cross picking. If you're a mandolin player, it's tremolo and cross picking. If you're a ukulele player, it's probably chord melody and cross picking as well. Cross picking meaning doing patterns of strings with your pick or your fingers, okay? Now, this is an area where most of my students have their own exercises they've invented. Don't just stick to my stuff. Make up your own stuff to warm up. The moral of the story is we want to spend a little time warming up before we go into anything as far as serious practice. Now, let's talk about the essentials under physical. Item C, the last item under heading 3, and that's fingering, tone, and timing. And if that's all you took away from this class, and you made that your gospel when you sit down, it's going to be very important you understand these 3 concepts. The thing about fingering is, with the left hand, if you're playing a piece and you have a finger that should be somewhere else, or you've chose something that causes you to have to double up with one digit, don't build that into your session. Make sure you work out the fingering on both hands before you go into repeating the piece. And that means getting your pen and making sure you know if I'm doing, let's see, I am going to write down on my tablature or notation 2 1 2 1 2 0 3 1 2. It's a lot of work, but if you need to write down the fingering, please do so. Otherwise, I'm going to have to do it with you at our next Zoom, which I don't mind doing. But you can save a lot of time that way. Same with the right hand. If I'm doing a tremolo, if I'm doing a roll, if I'm doing single string, you want to make notes under your score on that. So fingering kind of predicates everything else, because after all, both of our fingertips on both of our hands are the things that are making our notes. And the more we use, the better. That's also a fingering philosophy that I took from a jazz teacher once. He's like, the more digits on board, the better. You know, generally, if you find yourself using only 1 or 2 fingers on each hand, you probably want to add more on deck. That's like a flag right there. Now, we have tone. Tone has 2 levels. On the beginner level, it's, are we even hearing the note? We want to hear this, not this, or this. We don't want muted and we don't want buzzy. The 2 gremlins, as I call them, are muted notes and buzzy notes. Buzzy is not pressing hard enough. Muted is generally in the wrong area or bumped with another finger. Let's talk about how you can mute a note. This is a science. You're not pressing hard enough. You're too far from the fret. Another finger's bumping the string. So you might think to yourself, well, I'm not a beginner. I don't need to worry about that. Yes, but there's pieces of music out there that will reduce you to beginnerhood in minutes. And I'm working on a couple of them. If you ever want to be a beginner, just learn classical music and you will be a beginner again. And then you will have to think about all these concepts like, why does my note not sound clear? We'll look at the 3 areas. Am I close to the fret? Am I pressing down hard enough? And is there another finger bumping that string? That's the culprit. 3 flags to look for as far as tone. Now, timing. This is why I always preach, don't practice alone. Whether you're practicing with a friend or a metronome that's your friend, in my case, it's very sad, or you have a backing track online, which I'm a huge fan of, that'll force you to play in time. It's that simple. I remember when I first started learning jazz and I was trying to learn the melodies off of and I sight read, and I'm trying to learn the melodies off the paper. And the problem with anything syncopated or wildly fun on paper is that it's way more difficult to read than listen to. So if you have, let's see, you have things that are jazzy and syncopated, it'll have a bunch of ties and dotted notes and eighth note rests on the paper. When if all you did was listen to an audio track and slow it down and mimic what you heard, you'll learn it a lot faster. Plus, think about this. I have a lot of students that complain to me that they wish they could memorize their songs so they could have the luxury of looking at their hands and not staring at the page. Here's the solution. Listen along and play it. Don't read along and play it. Listen along and play it, because now you can look wherever you want using your ears as your guide. That's why ear learning eventually wins out over sight learning in the long run, okay? So that covers the environmental and the physical areas of practice. There are entire philosophies that would stay right there, but that's why I wanted to kind of race through those sections to make sure we had enough time to cover item 4 and onward, which is the mental area of practice. And this is where all the booby traps are. This is where people quit playing. This is where people have a bad experience. This is where people have constant frustration, and they'll walk by their hallway and see their ukulele on the wall and they'll scowl at it and it will scowl back at them. It's like a bad marriage. That's not what we want. We want a positive experience with the instrument. So the first thing I talk about is your instrument as a relationship. It's not you. It's not the banjo. It's that energy between the two of you that's going to cause you to become good or not at the instrument. So first of all, and I think you all know this, but let's clarify this. The progress path of learning any instrument is fraught with danger and ups and downs. It's a zigzag. It's not a gentle upward curve. I have failed this instrument more than you may have even practiced yours. I have literally put it up for months at a time. Terrible ups and downs, breakups, getting back together with it, break it up again. It's really highly neurotic with me. I'm going to go ahead and put it all out there so you don't feel so strange acknowledging this. If we accept that and we understand that sometimes we have to know when to walk away, we're not going to traumatize ourselves. If you sit down with your instrument and it's just not working, for the love of Pete, wave the white flag and walk away. Live to fight another day. Why traumatize yourself with a forced session when the stars may not be aligned? Whatever philosophy you want to use, the muse didn't flutter down that day. There was a solar flare. Use whatever justification you need to walk away from your instrument. What's funny is here, I'm giving a class on practicing and I'm encouraging you not to practice. This is one of the most valuable things you can do, is know when not to practice. Some of you have told me about this. You'll find that if you take 3-4 days and don't touch it, you'll come back and play a song, and somehow, miraculously, it's actually a little better. Somewhere back in your subconscious, that song was like composting. Even though it wasn't in our conscious layer of thought, it was improving without our assistance. This is a magical thing, and it's very, very true. I'm sure there's brain science to back it up. We'll get there later. So I had an experience when I was about 17 practicing the banjo, and this is also in my book, Banjos in Babylon, where I was practicing so stressedly and so long for like an hour and a half that I actually chipped my tooth while I was practicing a passage. I was grinding my teeth. I didn't even know it. And then I heard this thunderclap. It sounded that loud, and I chipped a rather large piece off my front tooth. And that was a big wake-up call for me that I can't be tense while I'm practicing. And I was so bound and determined. It was a Bach piece. And I'm like, I will get this or die trying. And it was stressful. Very, very stressful. And it's not really going to help you get that much better. I had a great teacher once, and I remember I played him a piece, and he's like, wow, he's like, I wish you were on TV. And I'm like, am I that good? And he's like, no, but I'd be able to turn it down then. Or change the channel. But I walked right into it. So Now, let's talk about objective number 1. The bottom line on your first page is positive feelings. And there's an interesting subject called discipline versus desire. Either you want to play something or you force yourself to play something. Now, granted, if I'm learning a difficult exercise, that's kind of difficult. It's not that enjoyable. So I had to force myself to play this to a metronome. Where if I sit down and put on like a B.B. King backing track, that's fun for me. I can do that for hours, okay? But then when I do my lesson with my instructor and he does things that I wish I could do, I realize that that's going to take discipline before I'm able to desire to do it. There's always, you can imagine a yin and yang with discipline on one corner and desire on the other. We either force ourselves or we want to. So all of our sessions are going to have both of these elements. But remember, under the relationship model, it has to be at least 80% desire and joy, or it's going to be something that we stop doing, you know? I mean, the mind's like a puppy dog. If it gets smacked enough, it's going to leave. It's not going to hang. If we mostly have a negative experience with our instrument, we're eventually going to drift away from it. It's self-preservation. Let's go to page 2 on our outlines. We're going to talk about a very interesting concept I call the barrier. And actually, Victor Wooten of the Flectones has a couple great books out. Look at his books, and he talks about this too. And I know you can relate to this. I'm going to try to describe it so you can all sort of understand. I'm going to practice later today, right? I have a Bach piece I'm learning on the mandolin, true story. And I know that the last time I did this is what happened. I walked in the room, I had my cup of coffee, and right before I sat down, it was almost like there's this invisible wall. Like it's like some little gremlin saying, "This is your last chance not to practice. Go do something else." There's literally a barrier that you have to burst through and force yourself to sit down and put your instrument on, and then we're okay. Now we're in the running. Now we're in the game. But you'll find that sometimes, especially if you've had a rough time recently with your instrument or you're practicing a particularly difficult piece, that barrier will be particularly strong. So just be aware that before you practice, there's an issue that will arise. And that's that strange barrier that will prevent you from even sitting down. You have to put your head down and charge through that. Don't logic it. Don't argue it. It will win. That's the dark side. We have to literally just run through that. Now, let's talk about item C under that, a practice plan. So most of you have a Jamalong practice room. That is your practice plan. However, it doesn't hurt to talk about these 5 ideas that you can use in tandem with your Jamalong practice room. Number 1, warm-ups. We talked about that. Start every practice with some warm-ups. Even if it's just kind of like twisting your shoulders, moving around. Some of you might be into yoga. I tried once and I almost died. But basically, if you have that ability to warm up, make that the top of each session. Number 2, new material. I'm a big fan of don't play stuff you know first. Go right to the hard stuff while you're fresh. Do new material first. New tunes first. Stuff that's hard to play first. Okay? While you have your aerobic energy, do that first. Then go to old material. And item 3, stuff that you can play fairly well. Notice I say fairly well. Not great, fairly well. Now we have technical versus creative. This is something that ties into brain science, and I'm not a brain scientist, but I have a friend who is, and he is convinced that there is some truth to the fact that our creative processes are linked to our right hemisphere, and our logical processes are linked to our left hemisphere of our brain. Now, whether that's useful or not, I don't know. It helps me remember this, because I do know that there's a different feeling in my brain. Well, if I'm doing this, a technical exercise, I'm practicing something very technical, or I put on a backing track and I'm doing this. I'm noodling around. That is freedom. Technical is constriction, logic, following a direct path. So we want to bounce back and forth between both those hemispheres. I don't care if you think of it as brain science or just a different feeling. Make sure you structure your practice sessions where you don't just do technical and work on something difficult. Stop, pull the plug, put on a backing track, improvise with a blues scale. Do something completely creative. And you'll feel like this shift happen. And your brain will thank you. You'll burn out less if you purposefully switch sides. Most of us have the tendency to do technical all the time because if we sit back, put our feet up, put on Netflix with the sound off and crank some B.B. King and Jamalong, we think that's not practice. That's just having fun. Practice can't be fun. Couldn't be further from the truth. Practicing being creative is just as important as practicing being technical. That's why I teach improvisation. If I'm playing over a G chord, I got my G scale. I'm trying to make beautiful phrases. That takes just as much brain power for me to try to be super creative and expressive than it does to play a chromatic scale. So that's why we want both halves, and that's what I mean by left versus right hemispheres. Number 5 under the practice plan. Take frequent breaks. There's something called the Pomodoro Method. An Italian, I think in the 80s, an Italian man named Francesca Cirillo, I believe, invented this method of whenever you practice, you have a timer. In fact, that's why it's called the Pomodoro Method. Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, and his timer was a red, round, tomato-looking timer, I guess. And he would only go for 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes, and then take like a 10, 15-minute break. But he would time it, so you had to take a break. And furthermore, when he took his breaks, he would go work in the garden, water the garden, walk the dog, water the dog, whatever. And he would make sure it was something completely different than music, and then come back and practice again. So many people are so obsessed by, I'm going to practice for an hour. And they forget to put breaks in every 15 to 20 minutes. Get your butt off the chair. Go do something completely non-musical. I guarantee you this is science, and this will help you have that fresh relationship with your instrument. Remember, it's a relationship. It's not an instrument. Now, D. Under B is the Jamalong Ethic. Always play with something, and you know this. You're always hearing this from me. Practicing in a vacuum by yourself is actually kind of dangerous. If you're sitting back going, and I'm messing with the timing, and I'm just being really free, that's fine. But just about anything else, you want to be practicing along with something because it's forcing you to use what I call your third ear, the part of your ear that listens to something other than yourself. Most people don't think about that. We always listen to ourselves, and then they get into a jam or a band practice, and they're out of time with people because they weren't practicing that double listening. So that's why we say always play with something. Now here's an interesting one. Item E, the classical versus the folk ethic. There's 2 different ethics in the world of practice. The classical ethic, which has been around longer, I think, as far as being taught, is that when you make a mistake, well, first of all, you don't make mistakes. You practice till you don't make mistakes, and then when you do make a mistake, you start over again. Nothing could be more dangerous in the bluegrass, jazz, folk, and rock and roll world because, as most of you know, when you make a mistake in a live situation, you have to literally run along with the train, get back in the boxcar you fell out of, and stay with the jam. So when you're practicing a tune and you make a mistake, I want you to practice going on from that point, not going and starting over again, much like life. I can think of numerous instances I wish I could go back and take back that mistake. But I had to move on from that point, okay? So same with music. If I'm playing Blackberry Blossom, I'm going to manufacture a mistake here. I'm still with the beat. I stayed with the backing track. Even though there were some bloody moments there and I might have kind of like winced inwardly, I stayed where the song was. This is something that you can't do by yourself unless you're really, really talented, and sometimes I can. Like right there, I'm trying to imagine a backing track, but make it easy on yourselves, boys and girls. Play to the flipping backing track. Make that your guide. Because one day, when humans come out of the caves and look at the sunlight again, we will be jamming together, and these skills will be so important that you're developing right now, okay? Like I say many times, this is a golden opportunity for all of us to buckle down and have amazing jams around the corner, okay? Because there's sunny days ahead. So now, mistake recovery, that's item I under E, under that area of the plan. There's always a good note to fret away. So if you do make a mistake, get in the habit of like yanking your hand 1 fret lower or 1 fret higher. It's going to be a good note. Scientifically, it can't be another bad note. There's only like one area of dissonance, and then you move a half tone away. That's the safety in Western music. Our smallest interval is a half tone, so it doesn't get that complicated. Now, the thing about mistakes too is mistake recovery is you want to make sure that you don't sell it. I guarantee you, my friends, I make as much, if not more mistakes when I'm playing than you all. I'm just really good at hiding them. Really slick at hiding them. I've gotten really slick at pretending like I meant to do it, or even smiling or smirking or deadpan poker face. The last thing you want to do is shake your head violently and say some curse words, because that does not look well on any of us. I had a student who had a terrible habit. She would always like shake her head, and I finally trained her to nod her head, and she would make a mistake and nod her head, and people thought she meant to do it. They're like, wow, that was jazzy. That was very expressive, because she was nodding her head if she made a bad note. Psychology, okay? Let's talk about the Gremlins. Item F, what to watch out for while you're practicing. Bad tone, that's the number 1 flag. Muted notes and buzzes are the 2 big gremlins. Playing too fast, that's huge. Everyone, I'm seeing the light bulb over the head right there when I said that. We all know if we play too fast, it's going to be a more difficult experience. It's going to be bad for the song. You probably heard me say my corny phrase, you could play Beethoven's Ninth tonight if you took 40 minutes between each note. Okay? You could. That's science. Now, granted, it would be a long show, but you'd have enough time to figure out the next note. I can play most of what my teacher talks to me about if I play it really slow. You know, he's teaching me these jazz lines. See, that was sloppy, but if I go... Now, I have to put my ego aside and say, I have to slow down to be able to do this functionally. Now, it's going with the Gremlins, wrong timing. That's Gremlin number 3 in my Gremlin list. That's where we need the audio tracks. You can go 1E and a 2E and count stuff off the page if you're particularly musically masochistic, but it's way kinder to use your ears for the timing and your eyes for the pitches. Think about that. The tablature or notation should just be the pitch of the note. The timing should be by your ear and eventually your heart and your emotion. You play by how you feel the timing. But most of us need the ear to learn timing. That's a huge one. Finally, item 4, selling your mistakes. I just mentioned this a second ago. Dude, there's 2 paths. You can keep a poker face or you can laugh or nod your head and go, yeah, that was jazzy. Boy, that was fun. I tend to go back and forth depending on who I'm trying to play with. You know, if Bela Fleck's in the jam, I'm going to keep a poker face. If it's a bunch of like friends of mine, I'm going to be laughing every time I make a mistake because it's fun. It's funny, you know. And mistakes is where we make most of our progress and we learn our stuff. So now, finding the sweet spot. Let's take a quick look at the progress meter chart. And this is another graph I made for this class. And this is all about how you find the place that is going to cause you to grow but not frustrate you too much. So, for example, stagnation on the left causes you to quit. However, burnout causes you to quit. Think about this. People quit for both reasons. Either they don't play enough or they play too much. There's a dangerous idea. You can quit from playing too much. So you want to find the sweet spot. So here's the comfort zone where you're enjoying it, but there's really not any progress. Progress is right next to burnout, so we have to be careful. If you can combine progress and enjoyment, that's what I call the sweet spot. And that's where you're pushing yourself, but not so hard that you burn out and quit. Super duper important with that one because it's about the long haul. It's about staying in for the long haul, even though we may take breaks. So remember, print that out, put that in your practice room, and remind yourself that your sweet spot is where you're pushing yourself, but be aware when any hint of frustration or burnout starts to happen, and then do the Pomodoro Method and take a break and go water the dog. That's your cue right there. Now, let's talk about item H, practice for real life. Okay, it's one thing to practice to get better on your instrument. It's another area entirely to practice for playing for other people or with other people. And to do that, we need what I call stress inoculation. You have to practice with someone else listening or walking by, or like when you do your Zoom lessons with me, and I'm sure I stress you out a little bit. I'm a nice, friendly guy, but the fact that I'm listening to you play is going to put some fire under your butt, and you're going to be a little stressed about it. Guess what? That's the single most important thing you can get from a Zoom lesson. You can't get that from asynchronous learning. You have to have what they call synchronous, someone right there synchronized with you in real time to feel that stress. So just be aware, if you're like every now and then like dreading your Zoom lesson with me, just know that's tough love, and it's making you able to play in front of other people. So that way when the jamming life kicks up again, and I'm holding my breath for that, we'll have a thicker skin, if you will. Now, the science of muscle memory. Here's something that's interesting. We all think that when we're practicing, we should focus 100% on what we're doing. That's causing it to be in your brain. Every now and then, you'll probably notice you played something or a song you know really well, but you're thinking about what you're going to make for dinner. That shows you that muscle memory has kicked in. You can't have muscle memory and the brain at the same time. I had a terrible experience when I was like 22 and I had a great concert, a solo show, and I knew the piece very well. And about 5 minutes before I went on stage, I decided to go backstage and just check a certain measure. And in the matter of minutes, I unlearned the piece. It was horrifying. I pulled it out of my muscle memory and put it back in my brain, and my brain's like, we're done with that. It's over here in the hand. And the hand's like, no, you wanted it back. And I ruined the piece because I pulled it out of muscle memory. So here's a good drill. It's called distracted practicing. Practice while you watch TV. Practice while you yell at the dog. Practice while you pretend to listen to your loved one. Practice while you are not thinking about your instrument. And that causes it to be forced out of your brain into the muscle memory of your hands and fingers. Interesting science, but I learned that the hard way. That does work. Now, comfort levels. There's what I call good pain versus bad pain. Anything sharp is generally bad pain. Anything that your instinct tells you, ouch, is bad pain. Aches, soreness, being tired, that's good pain. Think of it analogous to working out, okay? I hear that people do this. So basically, be aware that fingertips are going to get sore. I've been playing for like 30 years and I still get my callus sore after a good practice session. So that's good pain. However, I've been developing some tennis elbow and I've never even held a tennis ball. That's bad pain. So now I have to work with that, put some compresses on it, take a break, flex my arm, whatever. Just be aware that you're not going to be 100% comfortable, but some of the pain is a sign of growth. Another pain is the fact that you're probably straining too hard. Be on the lookout for the two different types. Now, time management, category 5 on page 2. There's a myth of I don't practice enough. We all have this built into our psychology in this culture. I don't practice enough. I think a lot of it's those scary ladies wielding the ruler with the horn-rimmed glasses that were our first teacher that just drilled it into our head that no matter how hard we tried, we didn't practice enough. It's not about how much. It's about how effective and how smart. Just taking half of what you learned today and applying it, you can practice for 15 minutes and get more out of it than someone practicing for an hour and being unorganized and wandering around. So the good news is that's a myth. You don't have to worry about how much you practice. You just have to think about how you practice. Okay? They say practice makes perfect. Well, none of us are perfect. So why do we practice? We're obviously not trying to be perfect. That's a really good one. So think about this. Quality versus quantity. If you employ half of what we talked about today, you will have quality in your practice sessions. Quantity is for people who don't have quality. If you don't know this technology, then you're going to have to go for an hour and a half to get the same amount of benefit. This is the good news. It's not about how long you're going to sit down with that thing. Okay, creating structure. I have a supplementary chart that it's the last item in your practice syllabus there, if you look, and I'm going to do a screen share and talk about that real briefly. Some of us need this, some of us don't. I'm a big fan of blocking out 2 or 3 times a week. And so you can use this chart if it helps. Write in 2 times a week and what day it is that you're going to sit down with your instrument. Okay? And then we have the trifecta, which you are doing. You have your practice room, you got lessons with me, and you're using the backing tracks. If you're doing that stuff, that's a way to keep on paper tracking yourself. Okay? Now, reminders in item D under 5. I'm a big fan of having people remind me to practice, just because it's easier for me. Like my roommate will be like, "You said you were going to practice. Why don't you practice?" He basically just wants me to leave the room. But the point is, having reminders, whether it's an electronic reminder or on your computer or on your phone, I have reminder apps. It's great. And then you get past the barrier and you sit down and you have a good session. Goals, item E under 5. Setting, monitoring, and being flexible. Hey, all of us are great at setting goals. All of us are usually pretty good at monitoring our progress of those goals because we like to beat ourselves up. Not very many of us are good at being flexible with our goals and working on the almost vaguely Buddhist sounding idea of being non-attached to achieving the goal in your desired time frame. Maybe it's going to take longer than you thought. Be flexible. Go, okay, I'm not going to get this song this week. I'll get it next week. Be flexible again. Maybe you'll get it next month. If you don't beat yourself up, then it's easier for me when I see you at our lessons because I don't have to prop you back up again and build up your tattered psychology because you beat yourself the heck up. So being kind to yourself and flexible with your goals is, I think, the bigger element than being goal-oriented. That's why I wanted to touch on that. Now, looking at the last one, it takes a village. Harnessing your inner circle. Some of you are married, some of you are not. Some of you live alone, some of you don't. If you live with other humans, at least let them know that you want to be practicing once or twice a week. And that kind of makes a psychological element to your life where whether they remind you or not, you know that you're going to be doing that because you told someone else. It's an accountability trick, okay? You can tell your cat you're going to get judged regardless. Tell some human that you're going to be practicing, and it'll actually make it harder for you to not do it because you have some accountability lodged in there. Okay? A good instructor, most of y'all have that. You got me. If you don't have me and you have someone else, that's fine. Make sure that they're recording music for you and they're exhorting you to play with stuff. Otherwise, you're learning your bad habits. You're cementing them in, okay? Jam buddies. If you have someone in your life to play with, for the love of Pete, do it. There's nothing better than that. And we're going to have that more, as like I said, as life comes back. And you want to collect jam buddies, friends, family, whatever, that are learning 2 or 3 chords on guitar. Remember, a lot of this music, my friends, is super duper simple. 3 chords. Or like some of the songs I like to say have both chords. They don't have to be virtuoso to strum a G behind you while you practice your scales. It's really simple for them. Now, social media, yeah, I know. It's a dark art. But we have a Jamalong group called Playing Music Together. Some of you have posted videos on that. If you haven't, consider it as a personal test to post something. I don't care if it's strumming 2 chords. Share it with our group. We got a couple hundred people on there. Right now, when we can't go to the park and have circles of jammers, at least we can have these temporary environments where you can share your music with people, okay? So we've got a YouTube channel, but mainly we have a Facebook page called Playing Music Together. Go like the page, and you'll see all different students who have posted videos of themselves playing a song. It's a good test. Finally, testing yourselves. Every now and then you kind of have to test yourself. There's so many philosophies about this. Don't do it if it freaks you out, by the way. I don't want you traumatizing yourselves. But if you're not too freaked out about it, think about playing a song for me at our next lesson. Say, hey, Braden, I want to open up the lesson with, I just want you to listen. I'm going to try to play this song for you. And you're going to get adrenaline coursing through your veins. You're going to shake like a leaf. You're probably going to sweat like a pig. It's not going to be that fun. But if you pass that, first of all, I'm not going to say anything mean, okay? You know what else? I'll probably tell you you're way better than you sound. We'll have some way of looking at it that's humorous. But it's a really good way to test yourself. So if you're not playing for me, think about our open mic. We have one coming up on February 27th, a Zoom open mic. Some of you were there. We're going to do that every other month. Test yourself. Come play in front of our student body on Zoom. Okay? They can't throw stuff. You can't throw stuff through Zoom. The worst that can happen is you make a mistake, you laugh, and you keep going. And everyone else will laugh with you. That's the beauty of this. Finally, when we start going outdoors and being in public again, there's a thing I call the park bench drill. Take your instrument to a park, sit on a park bench. People will walk by the trail. It can't be a park bench in the middle of the woods, by the way. It has to be by a path, okay? Otherwise, you're cheating. People will stroll by, and you're going to keep playing. Terror of terrors. Someone might even stop and listen to you. Keep playing, okay? No matter what happens, you keep playing. And it's a way to inoculate yourself on little tiny doses for playing in front of other humans because they're passing by. I've had gigs like that. I had a gig in Davis where I was playing this great funk band and great dance music, and everyone's sitting at the bar with their back to me. I could have been invisible. And then so we took a break, and some crappy song came on the jukebox, and the dance floor filled up. That kind of scarred me. But the idea was you keep playing regardless. If there's people or not, you slog on. Now, let me close today with talking about the bigger picture. We're in this for the long haul. You want to be doing this when you're 90, okay? When you're 100. If we try too hard in the small picture and want to have all these victories in the next 4 to 6 months, you're forgetting the bigger picture where if you just relax, calm the heck down, take it with a grain of salt, don't be in such a rush, you'll still be playing your instrument 6 to 10 to 15 years from now. It's the bigger picture. It's the hare and the tortoise. The tortoise wins the race because the hare's all stressed out by the side of the road, wondering why they can't practice correctly. And the tortoise is taking his time and he gets to the end. It's so much that fable, the hare and the tortoise fable. So I'm going to go ahead and end the class with a brief opportunity for if any of you want to chat or wave your hand and unmute yourself and talk about something, you're more than welcome to do so. If you don't, that's fine. Does anyone want to share a brief anecdote or story about practice? Daniel Scroggins, go ahead and unmute yourself, sir.
I had a question about, even with one instrument, my biggest problem is I'm just overwhelmed with the resources that are available. And every time I'm working on one thing, I'm thinking about the 100 other things that I should or also should be working on. And now I'm doing 3 instruments.
I feel your pain, Dan.
And I have all the time in the world. This is all I do is practice. And for me, getting into the seat is the hard part. But once I'm there, I can stay all day. But I never feel at the end of the day like I did what I was supposed to do. I feel like, yeah, that was fine. But like just a simple thing, like you say, okay, you only do that for 10 minutes. So do scales for 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like I accomplished anything in that 10 minutes. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, okay. And that's true of my whole universe.
This will save my mind because I play 7 different instruments. Imagine a giant garden with all these different raised beds. You may only go weed your onions that day, and all the other raised beds didn't even get looked at. You have to have trust, whatever belief system you have in the universe of your mind, that the other things are progressing even though you're not practicing them. You can play ukulele and it will affect the way you play piano. Everything's connected. I don't want to sound too Yoda about this, but it's all part of a matrix. And every time you tweak one little part of the matrix, it affects everything globally. So you almost, even if you don't believe me technically, employ some faith and trust and just know that every time you work on one area of the matrix, the whole is affected. That sounds kind of cosmic, but that's just the truth. Quantum physics will verify that. It's just the truth. So that's what I do with my 7 instruments. I just understand I have to take very small baby steps and have faith that all my instruments are being affected on some level that I don't even understand. And then it allows me to relax and take the baby steps peacefully. That was a really good subject, Dan. Anyone else want to wave their hand at me and bring something up? Hey, Arnie. Well, let's start with Arnie and I'll go over to you, Jeff. Arnie, what's up, man? Glad you made it. Unmute yourself there, sir.
Okay, yes.
He's here.
What I would like from you is if you can, send it to me somehow, You showed fingering drills.
Yeah,
doing those
okay.
fingering drills, going up and down.
Beautiful.
And I think I told you one time as a past swimmer, always part of the workout was drills that had nothing other than to improve your stroke technique.
Okay.
And so that's what I guess I would be looking for.
I love it. I'm taking a note right now to send you those as soon as we're done with the class here. Very good point, my friend. Jeff, go ahead and tell me what's up.
Yeah, just an interesting tidbit that I learned from a banjo instructor who said that there was research that had been done on this, that if you practice 15 or 20 minutes before you're about to go to sleep, there's something in neuroscience there that helps you retain it better, to recall it better later on. So
I like that. And for those of us who love frequent naps, that means we're really going to improve our practicing. That's an awesome concept. Hey, Lynn, go ahead and unmute yourself over there in the upper left of my screen. Yeah, we're still all learning Zoom. There we go.
There
okay,
we go.
Good.
One thing I learned was to get the tune in your head. A long time ago, I tried to play Blackberry Blossom, or not, Grandfather's Clock.
Okay.
And I was playing the notes. This was before backing tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't get it until I heard it in my head. And once I got it in my head, then I could play it. And it's the way I think I play most of these songs. Got to hear it and hear.
Yeah, no, that's good. And you know how we get inside there? Is these two holes on the side of our head. Through the ears. Yes, through the ears. That's a very good point. So I would add that to my theory of move away from the eyes, go to the ears, get it in your head, and eventually into our heart and our emotions, and then we're expressing ourselves. It's a magical process. That was a really good point there. I love that. We've got about 3-4 more minutes left if someone wants to wave their hand and share something or ask a question. If not, you will not be judged. And this was a great class. By the way, thank you so much. It would be very awkward if I did this and no one showed up. So I would do it anyway. But I really appreciate all of you so much for being a part of this journey. And I will see many of you on Zoom. If not, call me up and let's do a session. It's about time. And remember the open mics on February 27th. Every other month we'll be having if you want to test yourself. And other than that, have a great weekend. I'm so honored to have all of you as my friends and students. And basically, you're all my social life right now. So thank you so much for being a part of the journey. Have a wonderful weekend. Feel free to email me or text or call me if you have any more thoughts on this, okay? See you guys all soon. Take care. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you very, very much.